Negatives to lifting a Toyota Tacoma. There are a few. Let's get into them. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Robmotive. So let's talk about the negatives to lifting the Toyota Tacoma. You know, I did a video probably yesterday about the positives, the benefits of lifting the Toyota Tacoma. But of course, with every good, there's always the flip side. There's the bad. Number one, it limits potential buyers for resale. Now, you know, not everybody wants a lifted Toyota Tacoma. I know that because I get comments on the channel, leave it alone. It's perfect the way that it is. Why lift it? You're gonna mess it up. Not everybody wants one, and that means that when it comes time to sell it, to buy the next one, the newest version, or maybe the redesign that's coming sooner or later, you could have problems if you've lifted the truck. Another facet of that, I guess, is that not everybody's gonna want the particular lift that you have. Do you have a suspension lift? Do you have a block and spacer lift? How high is your lift? You know, every time you change something, you are shrinking the number of people who actually agree with you and like what you've done, unfortunately. Number two, it reduces the value at trade-in. And I know this because I've traded in a few modded vehicles, a couple of lifted vehicles, and I've even mentioned through the process, hey, it's lifted, it should be worth more. And I was quickly corrected for a lot of the reasons that I mentioned with number one. It limits the pool of buyers for the dealership. So they have to bring it in, maybe take the lift off, maybe lure it a little bit. They've got to do something to it because their number of buyers are going to be lower as well. So that means the truck itself is going to be less or worth less money to them, particularly, as I mentioned, if they have to do anything. If they have to put money into it, they're not going to give you more for the truck. That's going to come off of your bottom line. Number three, it will reduce ride quality depending upon the setup. You know, I've gone a few different ways, a couple of different ways on the lifts that I've done with my Toyota Tacomas over the years. I had the block and spacer, and what that does, it compresses everything. So you don't have as much travel, if you will, in the suspension. That's gonna make the ride firmer because it doesn't have as much distance, if you will, to travel. You know, when you put a block in the back, you know, between the leaf springs and the framework there, or the axle, it's going to compact those leaf springs. That is going to make the back firmer, maybe even bouncy. I noticed that in my 2018 Barcelona Red Tacoma. It was the first lift I ever did. It was a block and spacer, and immediately I noticed how hard it hit. You know, when you went over bumps and stuff, railroad tracks, decreases or divots in the road, even potholes and stuff, makes it just kind of bounce a little bit. And it hits, and it can hit really, really hard. Number four, you can cause damage to other components. I learned this the hard way. In my Voodoo Blue, I actually went with, I've mentioned this, a 3.5-inch lift in the front. That's what it ended up being. And that changed the angles of the CV axles. Well, on those CV axles is this boot. I've never understood why it's done that way because that's all that keeps the whole assembly sealed. Well, I had a tear in the boot, and I think I might even know when I did it. I went over a really hard bump, everything slammed because, again, the ride was firmer, and I think that's when I did it. I noticed it when I was underneath doing something with the skid plate. I had taken the skid plate off, and on the underside of the skid plate was all this oil and stuff, grease. It's because everything that was contained behind that CV axle boot came out because of the tear. I got to looking at it, and it was a really severe angle. And I think it was too much for the truck. That should have been corrected. And honestly, it's something that the shop probably should have alerted me to, that, hey, this is not good. You've got a problem. We need to do something with that. But they never did. That's another thing. Make sure if you are having a lift that you're going to a shop that you can actually trust. that they're going to tell you the bad things, even though it might cost them the business because you might decide you don't want to go further. You don't want to spend more money to correct those possible issues. But at least you're going to know the problems, and that's the sign of a good shop, in my opinion. Number 5, it can cause warranty issues. Now, this is always a big point of contention. I get questions on the channel all the time about warranty. If you put mods on your truck, you're going to void your warranty. Well, of course it depends. The CV axle problem that I had, that's a great example. By putting the lift on the truck, I caused the failure of that part. That would not have been covered by warranty, or at least it shouldn't have. It doesn't mean on any given day that your dealer won't fix it for you. It's certainly possible. But ultimately, it was caused by me and it wouldn't be covered. Another example I like to give, if you lift the truck and your tail light goes out, the tail light should still be covered because lifting the truck had absolutely nothing to do with the bulb in the tail light going out. But it can cause issues, and you need to make sure that you're aware of those and that you're willing to accept the risk of lifting the truck and causing yourself warranty problems. Of course, if the truck is out of warranty, it's fair game. It doesn't matter. You'd have to pay for anything that happens anyway. Number 6, it requires more money to be spent on other items. Now, I'm not just talking about things like, in my case, that CV axle. That would have had to have been repaired. But other things like maybe wheels and tires. If you lift your Toyota Tacoma, you've got to change at least the tires. Doesn't mean that you couldn't put a bigger tire on the wheels that you have. You certainly could. But if you're like me, you're going to want a little extra wheel poke. I don't want a truck that's lifted, that's driving around looking like it's on stilts. And that's what it reminds me of. I've seen people that have done that. They've lifted their trucks and they haven't done anything with the wheels. They've changed the tires. They haven't done anything to bring the wheel out a little bit. That's just a much better look for the truck. I think it gives the footprint the look that it should have when your Toyota Tacoma is lifted. Now, I've done it several times. You do have to make sure that if you're going to change the offset on the wheel, if you're going to pull it out, if you're going to give yourself some poke, that you have clearance on the front and the back of the fender area. And I'm talking about in the front. In the rear, unless you go crazy and put like John Deere tractor tires on, you're not going to have a problem. But in the front, when you increase the width of the tire and then move it out a little bit, when you turn it, you could have problems hitting in the front and the back of those fenders. Make sure, again, that you have a good shop and they know what they're doing and are honest with you about what's going to happen if you do go with an offset outside of the fender well. Anyway, those are just a few things, a few negatives to lifting the Toyota Tacoma to be aware of if maybe you're considering lifting yours, or maybe you're having problems now and can't figure out why. Could be because of the lift. Leave a comment, let me know. Do you consider these things when you're lifting your Toyota Tacoma, or you just want the look, you don't care, and whatever happens, happens? I'd be curious to know. Also, real quick, I do have 2 additional channels. Robmotive MT, all about mini trucks or compact trucks, currently the Hyundai Santa Cruz, and Robmotive JT, all about the Jeep Gladiator. Right now, the Jeep Gladiator Mojave, an awesome truck. Check them out, and if you're interested, why not subscribe? Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Bye.